In my first Ableton Move video, I learned it from the ground up on camera to kind of show what that process is like and test how easy it is to pick up. And I poked and prodded at the outer edges to see what it's capable of beyond the intended workflow. For this video, I want to do the opposite. Lean in hard to its intended use case as a sketch pad, as a super portable device, something you take with you, and something that you would use to sample the world around you and just play around with sounds. And while I still have my frustrations with this thing, I don't want to bury the lead here. I've been having a lot of fun making beats on it. I did the stuff that the Ableton folks put in the commercials. I sampled the world around me out in public, which, not gonna lie, made me feel kind of like a doofus. And I took it to a cafe that I really like, sat in its backyard, and had a really chill time just making beats and continuously sampling stuff around me. The beats that I made aren't really anything spectacular, and I'm going to talk a bit about that at the end, but I think they go a decent way to show what it feels like to work with the Ableton Move if you use it in its intended workflow. And it gave me a fun weekend of making beats, so that's nice. All right, so this first beat started off in my previous video, actually. I was testing out the little built-in mic, and I sampled a little hand drum. And after sending it to a chorus ensemble effect and a reverb, we get this. Which I immediately was like, that's gotta be the foundation of a lo-fi track. But before I went and actually recorded any chords, I started off with a just basic drum track. Now, let me quickly show you a little trick I've picked up for making it a bit easier to load in drum sounds. By default, if you have an empty sample and you go to load in a sound, it takes you to the most zoomed out folder structure. And so you'd have to go into user samples, go down into the folder, probably drill down a few levels, and that can get kind of annoying. So let's say I go in here and pick just any kick. Now, if I was to go into a different empty sample, boom, it kicks me back out to that farthest out view. But what you can do, now that you have something from, say, a sample pack, in this case, that's exactly what I have, I can just copy this sample. And then if I go to swap out this sample, it'll put me right back in the folder that I found it from. So if I wanted to load in multiple sounds from the same sample pack quickly, I can just start with one sound, copy that sound over, and then select a different sound from the same pack or same kind of group of folders, keep copying that stuff over, and go from there. Laying out a basic drum part was pretty simple, so let me just show you that. I can start a new clip, and by default, that will just be a bar long until you change that. So I can just have a little 4 on the floor, open hi-hat, put a kick in, record something. And as people rightly pointed out in my first impressions video, I didn't use capture much. Since filming that video, I've been using it absolutely all the time, and you're going to see it come in clutch in a second. And then I can quantize that. I do have to be a bit judicious with my quantize use, but I don't know. I've gotten used to it. It's fine. So this is a pretty standard workflow, and I'll give Ableton props here. They've implemented it quite well. But with the extra convenience of having that capture button in case you were just riffing and then immediately went, oh, I want to use that. And also pay attention to when this lights up. Once I started playing something is when it lit up. And then it grays back out once you hit play because it basically erased that buffered little recording. Hopefully that makes sense. You can basically tell when it's picked up something that you just played and whether or not you want to actually hit that button to capture it. So for a drum track like this, I can now just duplicate that loop, tweak some stuff in the step sequencer, and then put a clap on that last one, layer that reverb clap. So look, I've given Ableton a little bit of grief for some of the design decisions made in this thing, but I have to give them props for the immediacy. They did, I think, nail that. And you'll see that even more when it comes to this chords track. So let me go ahead and just start a new clip. And then I'm going to set this loop to be 8 bars long preemptively. And then I'm going to record in my first chord relatively unquantized. It's probably good enough for now, for demonstration purposes. Try again. So I can just hit capture. So let's say I'm just trying to figure out what chords I even want to play. I can just overdub that immediately because, ooh, I found something I like. I don't have to go back and record it. I can just hit capture and it's there. So that's one thing I really appreciate about this thing is that it blurs the lines between figuring stuff out and coming up with stuff and laying it down. That process becomes way more immediate, and I think that's very commendable. I think that's a cool feature. And I might go into that third bar, clean up that one note a little bit. That's a lot better, and I can just keep going. So the bottleneck becomes not my ability to record stuff, but my ability to come up with stuff, which is kind of exactly what you want. Then we got a bass involved. Once again, I'm a little annoyed that I don't get a ton of control over these parameters, but I was able to tweak this preset to taste to fit in with the track. And a pad. And let's not forget that this was me recording a little toy instrument, and I would consider turning this into a full track. So let's move on to the second beat that I made as part of the same session, sitting in the cafe backyard. There's some fun stuff going on here. I'm going to mute this for a second. We'll come back to that. So this has a similar thing going on to the previous beat where I've loaded in multiple sounds from the same pack using the copy pads over trick. So I basically just started sequencing in a 4 on the floor kick, using this pre-shifted clap and shifting it forward in time. Pretty simple sequencing all around. But pretty quickly, I start incorporating things that makes this device a bit unique among its peers. This is an accident. I had scooted, I think, my little mini music box across my table and then forgot that I did that. And I was just going through my bank of recorded samples, found this, and I'm like, I can use that. So that's now a little percussive element, which is kind of fun. And that's only the first happy recording accident of the bunch here. Now, I've had a couple people take issue with the fact that I keep trying to just stack a bunch of stuff onto one drum track. But if the purpose of this device is very quick and immediate beat making, stacking a bunch of stuff onto one drum track is about as quick and immediate as it gets. That's about as unoverthinky as I can think of. So I copied over this kick, and I can pitch it up a bit, cut off the attack just a tiny bit, and I am filtering it with a high-pass filter. So it becomes this little, like, percussion element instead of a full kick drum. At this point, we can introduce more elements. So this bass one shot is the first time I'm introducing step automation. Step automation is impressively easy. You literally just hold down a pad and twiddle it up. That's it. Any untouched step, I believe, just stays parked at what it was originally at, which that's totally fine. I have no beef with that. The reason I'm step automating here is because I wanted to try to fake sidechain. So on any step where the kick and the bass hit together, I am cutting the attack of my bass. So it's this versus this. Anytime there's a kick, it's doing this. Honestly, I think that sounds pretty natural, and that will not work for every kind of element or every track by any means, but it was a thing I wanted to try out, and that worked fine. I can keep building. Bring in that little 909 hi-hat. And then here's the second sampling happy accident. So the backyard of this cafe has a koi pond, and I was recording just kind of idly to try to get some kind of background cafe ambience, maybe to layer with a lo-fi beat that I was planning to work on later. And one of the fish went up to the edge of the koi pond and started kissing it, and it made this noise. Not a word of a lie, I swear to God. That's what I just accidentally happened to capture. And I immediately realized, well, he's kind of spitting though. So that's a fish kissing the side of a koi pond. Total happy accident, wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been recording at that specific moment. And you'll notice I've got that whole basic little beat going just on this one track, and then I can bring in a pad just to fill everything out. Spooky. So that's kind of a silly little beat, but I had fun making it, and it got me thinking, because of those sampling happy accidents, hey, let me take this a whole lot farther, which is how we get this third beat. So there's a park with a piano in it. So I went up to that piano when no one else was using it, and I sampled me playing a bunch of chords. I just set this on top of it, hit record, and sampled a bunch of chords. And then after I'd recorded that, I just set my start point, copied the pad over, set my start point again, kept that going, and made this short enough to cut off after a certain point. So I have all these chords I recorded that I can use. Some built-in ambience, because there were people around. And then this sound was originally the pedestrian push button, sent to the reverb, and pitched down an octave. Lo and friggin' behold, sounds kind of nice. I mean, it's basically a square wave, so it's going to sound fine. I also went down to the creek, and I ended up turning this into a little hi-hat open ride cymbal thing, because I have my hold and decay set to let this like ring out a little bit and then fade out. And then this, I actually don't remember exactly what this was. I spent a little bit of time just stomping around in some gravel and some leaves. So I think this was one of those turned way up and then reverbed. Same deal with something like this. I think that's a leaf. So I have all these little Foley samples to play with. The only thing not a Foley sample is this kick. So all of that stacked onto one track. And to lay out this beat, let me start a new clip just to show you. I can put out a 4 on the floor hi-hat creak thing. Let me just shift these forward a little bit. put these on these steps. Probably adjust that. I can duplicate that until I get to 8 bars, and then I can start laying out my piano chords. In this case, because they're chops, I can just put them on the first step. Of course, in this case, I knew exactly what I was about to do, so this was a lot quicker than it was with me doing it in the moment. But still, I am genuinely impressed about how quickly I was able to pick this up and get into a groove. With, I remind you, pretty much all recorded sounds. Now, we get into a little bit of iffy territory in terms of whether I would turn this into a full beat. After all, the kind of intended workflow is for you to make a beat on this thing itself and then export that stuff to Ableton on the computer and finish it there. This is probably too lo-fi to be something that I personally would want to release, and that introduces a bit of a weird tension between the two strengths of this device, which are the spontaneous recording with the tiny mic, which might lead to beats that sound kind of rough around the edges, and exporting and finishing tracks cleanly in Ableton. I'm still kind of working out how I feel about that, but it feels like the two major strengths of this device are a little bit in opposition. But to be fair, this is starting to remind me a little bit, in a positive way for me anyway, of the OP1, but a lot less expensive and a bit less quirky, where you're encouraged to just record stuff and lay stuff down very quickly. And dang it, I've been having a lot of fun with that. I also sampled just an individual note of the piano, a higher note, so that I could send it to a bunch of reverb and delay. And now, once again, kind of keeping in the intended workflow, record a sub bass, and I didn't end up using this track. So now in session mode, you've got your different kind of recombinations, and then the version. Get rid of that. With this, sent to 16 pitches from the push button. And I've gone in and shifted some of these kicks around a little bit because I wanted to have everything have a slight swing to it, and I wanted to set that manually, especially since I played these in sloppily on purpose. Hopefully that's a bit of a vibe, although once again, a bit lo-fi for my own taste. And you know what? As much as I wish this thing did more, because I think it's possible and I think it would be a better product if they made it do more, as much as I wish that, I had a really nice time just making beats in a very spontaneous, fluid manner, and this is well set up to do that. The cynical part of my brain thinks that they're being oh, it's limited on purpose and it's meant to be an intuitive sketchpad. The cynical part of my brain thinks that that's just them covering for some of its limitations, and maybe there's an aspect of that, but a good amount of thought was clearly put into how to make the basic functions of this thing very fast and intuitive to use, and I got into a pretty solid groove with this thing after having only used it for a day. And immediately the bottleneck became my own musical brain, not the device itself, in most cases anyway, for the basics. And that whole make beats while you're out and about and sample the world around you approach is actually pretty niche. I don't think there's a ton of people who are going to want to do that, but hey, I'm definitely in the target demographic for that, and I did enjoy myself using this in that way. And I might even consider finishing at least one of the beats I made as a part of those past few days. There's one more thing on this I wanted to try, and I just confirmed that this does work. A viewer asked me if you could use the sampling to basically do overdubs of instrument parts, and yes, you basically can. So I've just got a 4 on the floor kick, I'm going to get recording ready. And now it's going to cut it to the first transient. So let me just back that up. Now, that sounds like garbage, but hopefully that's just a quick proof of concept. It does work. Do with that information what you will. If you'd like to see me in a flaily, frazzled state learning the Ableton Move, you can check out this video up over here. I think it's pretty entertaining. And if you'd like to see some stuff with a different device, you can check this out down over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.